steal, and destroy. John chapter 10, verse 10. And the battle against this enemy is in the mind, because his primary weapon, he's the father of lies, the great deceiver. And so it is, the battle is in the mind. Once you begin to believe a lie, you give it the power of truth in your life, and it will change how you live. So who told you that? The lies we believe. Let me just, some of what you're going to hear today is some material I've taught to you before. What I'm doing is I'm working on, my son asked me to come and speak at his school, the 7th through 12th graders, on the topic of suicide assessment and suicide prevention. I am so excited about that and so nervous at the same time. But because I don't know how much of what I would say might be allowed in a secular setting, but this is what I would talk to teenage kids about in terms of, you know, those heavy emotions that lead to sort of suicidal ideation. And so parts of what I'm going to talk about today, you've heard it before, but this is what I would like to bring to that school. So a lie that is the enemy's favorite, especially with women, and specifically with mothers, sounds something like this. You don't have what it takes. You know, you really don't know what you're doing. It's not good enough. And that's the thought that he tries to place in our mind. And our beliefs inform our emotions. And all those statements, all those lies that we believe would make us feel insecure and inadequate and inferior, right? That's the battle. Typically, men struggle with feelings of insecurity and inadequacy differently than women. There's a study that was done at Cornell University with an engineering class, and they discovered that when the class became very challenging, that men and women responded completely differently. Men, when they started to struggle with the class, typically what they thought was, the teacher sucks. That test was really poorly written. The women, on the other hand, were more prone to think, I knew I shouldn't take this class. I knew I wasn't smart enough. I don't have what it takes. Men blame shifted, certainly not a healthy response, but it was sort of last week's lie. The lie was, I got this. The lie of pride. That's where men go. Women interpreted that situation and they internalized that, the difficulty in class, with statements about themselves. I'm inferior, I'm inadequate. One of Satan's favorite strategies is to play on our insecurities. Why does that work? Because there's always an element of truth in his lies. Yes, in many ways we are inadequate. There are ways we don't measure up. And so he takes that and he magnifies that and he manipulates that and it becomes his tool. And he has ample tools to work with. Just think about, I was thinking about the everyday example of social media. It is almost inevitable to be caught up in comparison on social media because people present their very best versions of themselves, and then we post that because we want other people to see that, and so we post this sort of idealized version of ourselves. I'll give you an example of that. I know this guy. He biked all the way to Hutchinson and back, 150 miles, and then he posted that on social media, like, whoa. And I know for certain that he has sat on his butt for every single day since then in terms of exercise. But it sure looked good on social media. Social media is such a facade. I was thinking we really should change the name of Facebook to Facade. Yeah, Facade. Are you on Facade? Maybe we could be facade friends, okay? Social media, it's almost like this form of pornography where you stare at airbrushed and posed versions of other people's lives, and then you feel insecure, and then you feel discontent because we start comparing. And those sanitized, sort of spectacular versions of other people's lives make us feel so inadequate. Church can become like social media. It really can. People come, best versions of themselves on, and when that happens, boy, it's so hard to be transparent and vulnerable in that kind of environment. It really sort of a form of hypocrisy because everybody's broken. Everybody's struggling in some area. We are all in process. Okay. Back in 1971, as an illustration I've used before, and I'll probably use it out at the school even though they're going to go, I wasn't even born in 1971, but 1971, Gene Knight released this funky soul sound that was entitled Mr. Big Stuff. Remember the next line? Mr. Big Stuff, who do you think you are? Your answer to that question, who do you think you are, is one of the most essential components of your emotional health. One of the most essential components of your psychological health. Your answer to that question, who do you think you are, because it's all about what we would call self-definition. Self-definition is our personal conclusion as to our value and worth and significance as a person. It is what you believe about yourself. Okay? Self-definition. Probably the root factor in most people's emotional struggles. One of the most deadly weapons in Satan's arsenal is to assault and distort one's self-definition, because it has such a pervasive effect on the rest of your life. Why is that? Because our beliefs inform our emotions put us in motion and create a behavior. It begins with what we believe. People with a healthy self-definition, studies have shown, perform better at school, they perform better on the job, they have fewer marital problems and relationship problems, they are less prone to depression and anxiety and anger. Some people have such poor self-definition that they are just constantly ridiculed with self-doubt, and then depression, and then feelings of inferiority, and then worthlessness. Those are heavy, heavy emotions, and you can't carry heavy emotions very long without becoming a dysfunctional person. Here's my favorite slide. I won't work completely through this week, but there is a situation, an event, something happens. That's the trigger event. We apply meaning. We interpret that event. That produces a thought or a belief in our mind. The thought then informs our emotions. Emotions put us in motion and produce a behavior. In order to change a behavior long term, you have to change the message in the mind. The battle is in the mind. Okay. Use that, leave that there, process this story through that chart. Mary could never compliment a co-worker who had been recognized for their good work. Instead, she always found something to criticize, and she made some observation that suggested that, well, the project could have been done better. She could not be happy at another person's success because she was basically unhappy with herself. Mary had very poor self-definition. How could Mary be anything else? During her childhood, she could never please her dad. No matter how hard she tried, it was never good enough. She could not measure up. She was never affirmed or made to believe that she was a worthwhile person. In a real sense, Mary was programmed, ingrained patterns of belief to be competitive and to be critical. That's the behavior, because she felt so insecure, the emotion, so insecure about herself. What are some of the emotions that are associated with an unhealthy self-definition? Well, as I just said, Mary felt insecure, just a sense of worthlessness fostered, and it grew into a sense of hopelessness. She felt envy, doubting her own worth. She was envious of those who appeared better than her. She was angry. Comparing herself with others, she became bitter and resentful. She had a sense of fear all the time because other people might really discover just how defective she was. And that's the huge emotion, shame. She felt defective, just a pervasive emotion that ran through all of her thinking. Somehow she was defective, she didn't measure up, she wasn't good enough. Emotions put us in motion, produce a behavior. What are some of the behaviors that are associated with an unhealthy definition? A pattern of comparing ourselves with others, always, and we never quite measure. Being highly sensitive to the disapproval or correction of others. Avoidance. Rarely would she try something new because she had such little self-confidence. Addictive behaviors. Well, sure. I always say, why do people drink? Well, because it works. Temporarily, she would drink. It would give her courage in social situations because she just didn't feel good enough to be herself. And difficulty cultivating friendships. Because why would I take the risk of being vulnerable? I'm just going to be judged. We tend to act in harmony with our mental self-portrait. If we don't like the kind of person we are, we think no one else will like us either. And that influences our social life. It influences our job performance and our relationships and on and on. Our beliefs inform our emotions, which in turn influence our behavior. The message or thought in our mind behind all of those emotions, behind all of Mary's behaviors, behind all of that was self-definition. Who do you think you are? And your personal conclusion as to your value and your worth and your significance as a person, that's your identity. And not surprisingly, Mary comes to us for marriage counseling because her husband has reached just a point of exhaustion and contempt because of her sort of emotional coldness and then her verbal abuse. She's depressed. She's contemplating suicide. To change Mary's behavior, we got to go back and do the work of rewriting her self-definition. And in order to do that hard work, she needs to understand and to answer the question that is the title of this series. Who told you that? Who told you that, Mary? And why are they still having that much power over your life? It's the lies you believe. But in an abusive family system, and in a secular society that is so cruel, we develop such screwed up concepts of how to measure value and worth and significance, and the enemy will capitalize on all of that. Okay, now this is what I want to bring into the school, because let's build a theological foundation for a healthy self-definition. And there are 3 building blocks to this foundation. The first building block is to understand our inherent value. I brought this message over to Dakota County Jail one Sunday. Oh my gosh, the guys eat this up. Because you can just imagine, everybody there had such a poor self-definition. After all, they were in jail. But anyway, the first building block is called inherent value. Back a number of years ago, a 72-page notebook of drawings was sold at an auction for $30.8 million. What would make a notebook so valuable in the eyes of the winning bidder? And the answer is they were hand-drawn by Leonardo da Vinci. They were originals. The notebook's value was inherent because of the artist. And in the same way, every human being is a God original. Whatever the untrained eye will say about our value, whatever society says about our value, we are made in the image of God. And all the common ways in which we size people up and measure whether they are significant or insignificant, it's a lie. We are made by the awesome creator of the universe who planned and formed us. One of my favorite verses. We are God's masterpiece. I'm reading out of the New Living Translation here. The NIV says, we are God's handiwork. You've heard me say this so many times, I bet you even know the Greek word. We are God's poimaia, where we get our word poem. We are God's poem. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things He planned for us long ago. What an incredible verse. There is a verse about our inherent value. It is based upon the truth in that verse. We are of great value simply because we're created by and created for God. We have significance and worth placed upon us by our Creator. That is the beginning place, the beginning point of forming a healthy self-definition. What a difference between that and believing, who am I? Well, I'm the product of evolution. Billions of years ago, I evolved in a single cell in some slimy primordial soup. And somewhere down the line, then my great-great-great-great-grandfather was a monkey. What a difference between those two belief systems. The foundational piece of our self-definition of who do you think you are is based upon that truth. We're made by God, for God, in His image. Beginning point of understanding our identity. Created, loved, valued by God. We are of great worth to Him. And all of our ethical decisions, all of the sort of moral outworking in our life of what we do is based upon that decision or that belief. So how dare we look down upon someone or treat someone poorly who's created in the image of God and by God? That person has inherent value and that person has worth, which becomes the basis for why typically the church is going to take a strong stand against abortion or any kind of infanticide or those sort of moral issues. There's great value and worth because of our inherent value. A second type of value, which can be, which we assess our worth by in forming our self-definition, is called attributed value. Attributed value. And this has to do with the value placed upon us by the opinions of others. And we'll go, oh, okay, now we're in trouble. But most of us have formed our self-definition, whether positive or negative, in light of the value placed upon us by primary caregivers, our parents, those significant adults in our lives when we were growing up. And if that person affirmed our value and communicated that they believed in us, then we came to sort of believe in ourselves as well. But some parents, because of their own dysfunction, passed on a sense of condemnation to their children. And what we have discovered is the amazing power of a self-fulfilling prophecy. The self-fulfilling prophecy determines our attributed value. Because when that significant person in our life believes that we were of worth, that we had capabilities and potential, we tended to function in terms of that person's belief in us, their faith in us. We lived up to that prophecy about us. But on the other hand, if someone of influence in our lives thinks that, not very talented, you won't amount to anything. That became a self-fulfilling prophecy as well. And depending upon the influence of other people, we will tend to become what is believed about us. So once again, it is so important to place our value, in this case our attributed value, upon what God says about us, what God has determined our value to be, instead of seeking or finding that approval in others. And the Bible, from beginning to end, communicates affection, God's affection, his acceptance, his approval. This is, again, one of my favorite verses. This is where I find attributed value. See how much our Father loves us, that he calls us his children. And that is what we are. I wonder what translation that is, because that's not how I memorized it. How great is the love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called the children of God. And that is what we are. The whole message of the good news is he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sin. He loved us in spite of our sin. I didn't need to earn that or perform for that. Unconditional love, that is attributed value. A third kind of value, here's the third building block of assessing the worth of a person. It is called attained value. While inherent value comes from by the virtue of being created by God and in his image, and attributed value is based upon our identity, our inheritance in being in Christ. Attained value is what we earn by the contribution we make in life. It's the investment that we make in this world. You've heard of people being referred to as good for nothing. It's just good for nothing. That's an assessment of value placed on that person's sort of performance, their contribution to this life. That's their attained value. And you go, oh, okay, again, we're on shaky ground, but we need to be careful here as well that we don't let society define what that should look like. Oh, society might ooh and ah over something that they consider important that is really nothing more than just self-centered, narcissistic, self-focused activity that has very little value in God's eyes. Society measures attained value in terms of, well, your position or your popularity, your paycheck, the power you have, that Porsche in your driveway, Mr. Big Stuff, who do you think you are, wearing all your fancy clothes and your big fine car, or whatever that song says. The disciples, one day they're having this argument among each other about who's the greatest, am I going to get to sit on the right hand or the left hand of Jesus in the kingdom? And Jesus' response to them essentially was this: that's not how you measure greatness. That is not what your attained value is based upon. I didn't come to be served, I came to serve. And when you serve the least, the last, the lost, you're serving me. I tell you the truth. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. And so society's measure of attained value is all screwed up. Society confuses prominence with significance. Big difference. A professional athlete is prominent. Not very significant. Big deal, you can take a round ball and put it through a net. Does that really matter in life? Society measures attained value based on prominence. God says it's measured on what is eternally significant. And I love this Martin Luther King quote. Everyone has the power for greatness, not for fame, but greatness, because greatness is determined by service. When we are serving others, we are being perhaps most Christ-like. And that is what our attained value is based upon. Someday when we stand before God and give an account for what we have done with our life, that's what we will be judged on as believers. Not judged on sin, we've already been judged when we came to faith in Christ, and we are pardoned and acquitted. But we're going to be judged on what we did with this life. And it's based on, how did you serve me? How did you serve others? Because you're serving me when you serve others. That's attained value. Our soul cries out for answers to 3 questions. And this is sort of the summary of all we've talked about. There are 3 questions. The first question is an identity question. Who am I? That's a question about our inherent value. This is how it's answered. Who am I? I'm created by God, and I'm a child of God. That's who I am. Second question, the soul cries out, do I matter? Okay. It's a question about importance. Do I matter? And the answer to this is attributed value. Do I matter? Well, the Son of God came to this earth and died this horrible, cruel death in order that I might be forgiven. Obviously, I am so loved by God. Do I matter? I matter to God. I am of great worth to God. And the third question is about impact. What is my place in life? Why am I here? Yeah, the soul cries out for, why am I here? Because there's this God-shaped void in our heart that God himself put there. He set eternity in our hearts. Why am I here? I'm here to invest my life in serving others in Christ-like love. That's the purpose. I honor him when I do that. And the emotionally healthy person, the person with a healthy self-definition, answers those 3 questions in just the way I did. Our beliefs inform our emotions put us in motion and create a behavior. If this is what you believe about yourself, the way I answered those questions, will we still have emotional ups and downs and light emotions and heavy emotions? Of course, we live in a fallen world and we are sinned against. We are sinners, we are sinned against. Life is hard and it might not get easier. In fact, in this world you will have trouble, Jesus promised us. But we don't allow our emotions then to dictate how we behave, because we're in charge of that. We understand the emotions are just messengers from the front line, and we go back and we do that hard work. Why did I believe that? Why do I sense this emotion right now? Because I'm in charge of my emotions, and I'm going to express them in a healthy way. Because I go back to this belief. Because no matter how painful life might be right now and how much I'm struggling, I go back to, I know who I am. I'm a child of God. I do matter. I am loved by God. And why am I here? I'm here to honor him and to serve him. I love this stuff. Any questions? Seriously. Anyone want to talk about that? And that last little part was just extra because I am not minimizing how difficult life can be and how painfully emotionally painful it can be at times, because I think, okay, if I'm delivering this, and some little 9th grader is sitting here, and he's thinking about, he is in such emotional pain that he's going to maybe end his life, what's he going to hear? I mean, I'm really wrestling with that, and scared to death about going over and talking to, I don't know, students, maybe 500 students. But I am pumped. Yeah. No questions. That's pretty good. Who told you that? There we go. That's the question. Who told you that? And Father, keep our answer to that question, who told you that, from being anything other than This is what the word of truth says. This is what you have said about me. And give us strength to fight the lies and replace the lies with the truth, and therefore live in light of that. Just so grateful that we're your children and we are loved by you. And none of that is based upon our earning it. It's based upon who you are. And that's the real question. Who are you? Father, thank you. Bring a sense of security and peace and just comfort into our heart because of those truths. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Want to stand? Well, let you guys do your thing.